Hi, I'm Femi OK and you're in the stream. Today, 34 US lawmakers are planning to skip Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's speech to the US Congress. What does that say about the state of Israeli-US relations? Oh my goodness, so much talked about, so much written about a speech that hasn't even been done yet. We're waiting for that speech to happen, but while we're waiting, what is happening online, Malika?
People online are doing the same. So of course there are critics and there are also supporters of Netanyahu's planned speech. They're using hashtags to get that across. One of the bigger ones is Bibi doesn't speak for me. That one has about 6.6 thousand mentions. On the other hand though, is on the other side, Bibi speaks for me. That hashtag has about 6.3 thousand mentions, and that's over the past 30 days. Now, naturally, we want to know what you think at home, so you can let us know using our new app. Download it, and you can send us your thoughts and interact with the show live as it happens.
Now, who do we have in our studio? Well, with us we have Rachel Cohen, and Rachel is a writing fellow at the American Prospect, which is an online magazine. Rachel, great to have you here on the stream.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you
for dragging yourself away from Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech that he did today before the speech for tomorrow, and we'll be digging deep and picking your brain as to what you think about what's going on between US and Israel relations. Are you set?
I'm very set.
All right, excellent. See you in a moment.
Hi, my name is Ran Bari Shafat. I'm a lawyer and an Israeli activist, and I'm in the stream.
The first time Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke to the US Congress, he said, I'm going to quote him here, the unique relationship between Israel and the United States transcends politics and parties, government and diplomacy, end of quote. And that was back in 1996. On Tuesday, Netanyahu will speak to Congress again. The difference this time is that 34 US lawmakers, including Vice President Joe Biden, are planning to skip the speech, and President Obama has refused to meet with the Israeli leader. This mounting tension is caused by major differences over nuclear negotiations with Iran. Netanyahu believes a deal with the Islamic Republic is dangerous, while Obama wants to give a nuclear agreement a chance. So is the relationship between the US and Israel in crisis? To help us talk about this, we're also joined by Jonathan Camel. He's an activist with the pro-Israel lobby, AIPAC. Mir Javed Anvar is the editor of the Iran-Israel Observer and an Iran politics lecturer at the IDC Herzliya College. And Haviv Retik Gur is a political analyst at the Times of Israel. Great to have you all here in the mix. Starting with Jonathan here, if you were looking at Prime Minister Netanyahu as a political figure and what he's doing politically, how would you break down this week, the few days that he's spending in the US? What's going on here?
I think we need to think of it in the context of the entire US-Israel relationship, which is very strong and very stable at the moment. We see incredible amounts of coordination between the US and Israel strategically in defense, in security, in energy, in water cooperation. And looking at this speech and the politics of the speech is really not what characterizes the strength of the US-Israel relationship.
So Haviv, from your position sitting there in Israel, are you seeing that same perspective? How are Israelis viewing what Prime Minister Netanyahu is doing just a couple of weeks before the elections?
Well, I think that the Americans have not made the case that they needed to make. And so there's actually quite a bit of support for the Prime Minister. His political opponents in the election are accusing him of grandstanding, of playing politics in the middle of an election with Israel's foreign policy, but they don't disagree with him on the substance. The Americans are pursuing a deal with Iran that they're not actually telling, not only Israel, but they're not telling Congress all the details of that deal, and there's a lot of fear that Obama needs the deal too much and will surrender too much. So I think that we have opinion polls of Israelis. Most support Netanyahu on the substance of his argument with President Obama. There's a little more questioning whether he has to go and give this speech and start such a ruckus with the Americans.
Mayor, you heard Habib mention the opinion polls in Israel, and so we got this Facebook comment that I want to direct to you. This is from PJ Johnson, who writes, "It is inappropriate to speak 2 weeks before an Israeli election, as it gives an unfair advantage to Netanyahu and not equally to the other leaders who are competing." So what's the view on that aspect of this, the timing of this?
I think there are some people who are concerned. It really depends on which side of the political equation you are sitting. If you are pro-Netanyahu, you see this as Netanyahu carrying out his mission as somebody who believes that Iran is about to have nuclear weapons and will annihilate Israel. And if you're sitting on the opposition, you think that no, this is a ploy by Netanyahu exactly 2 weeks before the elections to win more mandates. And according to Yediot Ahronot news agency in Israel newspaper, a Likud official said yesterday that we're hoping to win more mandates from the speech of Netanyahu in the Congress. So it's a divisive issue regarding the way Netanyahu is addressing this issue in the United States.
Let me just play a little clip from earlier on today. That would be Monday in Washington, D.C. And this is what Prime Minister Netanyahu said speaking at the APEC conference.
Reports of the demise of the Israeli-U.S. relations is not only premature, they're just wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, Israel and the United States will continue to stand together because America and Israel are more than friends. We're like a family.
So, Rachel, you were there, right there, listening to Prime Minister Netanyahu. What was the response in the audience like?
Well, I think that the audience definitely agrees largely with the president, but I don't think that the audience is necessarily representative of where the American Jewish community stands on this issue. I think that the speech is interesting. Oftentimes people are trying to draw these large conclusions about what does it mean about the future of the relationship. Yeah. And I think it's helpful because
and he spoke about family there. Did you feel like he was being welcomed by family here in the US?
He's definitely welcomed by family, especially, I think there's no place on earth he's more warmly welcomed than the APAC Policy Conference, even more so than in Israel. Right. So he's definitely, warmly welcomed. But I mean, I think people are upset, including his closest friends. Some people like to say this was a manufactured political conflict, but even the former U.S. ambassadors to Israel, even Abe Foxman, who's a staunch pro-Israel advocate, all these people have criticized the speech and said it was a bad idea, and so there's no real reason why they would manufacture
Can
a
I
political.
interject here for a second?
Yeah, please do. Go ahead.
I'd love to respond to Rachel.
Yeah, let's go Mayor first and then Jonathan. Mayor, go ahead.
If Moses were to come down from Mount Sinai again with the 10 commandments on Israeli policies regarding the United States, the first commandment would say, "Thou shalt keep support for Israel a bipartisan issue." And Netanyahu's actions, and I'm
You just made Moses incredibly political, Mayor.
Well, you never know. He's an Israeli.
Right.
But Netanyahu, that's what bothers me. The state of Israel, we elected a prime minister. If he's not happy with the Iran deal, he should say absolutely. It's his job, whether we agree with it or not, with his opinion, he's got to say it. But to go in such a partisan way, to make Israel a wedge issue, to put American Jews basically to say that you either support my view or your president's view, this is something that's very detrimental to the national interest of the state of Israel, especially when it comes to its relations with its best friend, which is the United States.
Jonathan?
Yeah, I would completely agree with Habib. I would say that nothing matters to me more than a strong U.S.-Israel relationship. I just want to respond to Rachel's comment about not representing the majority of American Jewry opinion on Iran. I would very much disagree with that, and I would say that a majority of American Jews believe that Iran is not being accurate on its information that it's giving to the international community regarding its intentions regarding nuclear weapons. And I would argue that a majority of American Jews want to see more sanctions on Iran, want to see the Congress working actively to review any deal that the president agrees with. And I think that's what Netanyahu is going to speak about. Whether or not it came about in a very partisan way is very troubling to me, obviously. But the content of his speech is really important, and the content is what we should be talking about.
All right, so Jonathan, slow down, because
sure.
This is I'm just going to find this tweet here, because this made me laugh a lot as I was watching President Netanyahu say today, and look at this tweet here. Andy Carvin tweeted out the same thing. Never has so much been written about a speech that hasn't been given. So really what we wanted to focus on today was US-Israeli relations, because a speech that is yet to be given, even if we got a copy, it may well change. Let me just bring in Haviv here for a moment. There's something else I want to show you here. This is from President Netanyahu's own Twitter account. I'm going to the United States, not because I seek a confrontation with the president, but to speak for the very survival of my country. What is at stake here, Haviv?
That's a fantastic pivot. I'm going to say something maybe not accepted too much in the discourse. The American-Israeli relationship is not a relationship of family. These are two peoples, two nations with separate lives, separate interests. They speak different languages, and they see threats very differently. If President Obama is striking a deal that is disastrous for Israel, if he's wrong, because at stake is a nuclear weapon in the hands of Ayatollah Khamenei, not in the hands of your Iranian friend who you met at a bar in New York. If he is wrong, then the scale of the disaster can't be measured, and everyone in this business knows that. We're talking not just about an Iranian nuke that might be used, who knows? We're talking about an Iranian umbrella for Hezbollah. We're talking about a Saudi nuke and an Egyptian nuke, because they're not going to stand around. And we're talking about something even deeper. We're talking about people no longer in this region and in other regions believing that America is policing and preserving and securing the world. So there's a lot at stake. And just one last sentence, we don't know what's in the deal. And Congress doesn't know what's in the deal. And John Kerry said that today.
Sure.
So it's so much at stake and so little knowledge. I'm not blaming Netanyahu here for this crisis.
Mayor?
I'm not disagreeing with that. Haviv, you know, the state of Israel receives more U.S. officials than perhaps some states inside the United States. The Americans update us after every round of negotiations. We've had American officials, your newspaper, the Times of Israel, has written about it. I don't think the Americans are keeping us in the dark here. I think the issue here is that Prime Minister Netanyahu doesn't agree with President Obama. Okay, of course, that's valid. He's got his point of view. But to say that the Americans are going behind our back and that they're doing something sneaky behind our back, which would endanger us with a possible existential threat, I don't agree with that point of view.
Today, John Kerry warned Netanyahu that he should not tell Congress what Israeli intelligence knows about the deal. Says the U.S.
There's a difference, Haviv.
I think we should also recognize when
it
people are...
It should be public.
Gentlemen, just give me a pause.
Not to say public.
Gentlemen, take a pause for a moment. Rachel?
I think sometimes what often gets lost in this conversation about the speech, people, if the content of what Netanyahu is going to say tomorrow is so important, there are multiple ways he could have said that to a mass audience of the American people. They're sort of acting like, why don't they want to listen to me? Why? We have important things to say. And that's not untrue, but there are so many other ways.
Other ways, like, for instance,
he could have been invited on any Sunday talk show. He spoke at AIPAC today in front of 16,000 people. There's the idea that only this highly political speech that's taking place tomorrow is the only way
Rachel, the coverage has been amazing.
Netanyahu could
The coverage, like the 24-hour coverage.
Right, and he knows that.
Yeah.
He absolutely knows that.
Right.
And so, I don't know, I think just that's an incredibly disingenuous talking point that's being repeated by everyone, that only this speech tomorrow is the only way the Prime Minister of Israel can teach Congress about what's going on.
All right, hold tight for a moment. Hold tight for a moment, all the guests. Hold tight for a moment. Just take a breath for a second, because I just want to bring in the community, because they're eager to get into the debate.
Lots of people wanting to talk about the heart of what Monday's speech and Tuesday's speech are supposed to be about. Mira says Netanyahu has crossed a line by trying to undermine the Iran nuclear negotiations. And on that same note, there's someone with the same view, Jonathan. There's a video comment here. Have a listen to this.
Members of Congress should skip Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's speech because he's proven to be a terrible prognosticator about the development of weapons of mass destruction in the region. He told Congress in 2002 that Iraq had centrifuges the size of washing machines and predicted that Saddam Hussein was developing nuclear weapons. He's been similarly wrong with Iran, contradicting both U.S. and Israeli intelligence reports that Iran is not pursuing a nuclear weapon. Thus, members of Congress really have nothing to gain in terms of going to this speech.
So Jonathan, in that video comment, Josh says he's been wrong before, speaking of Netanyahu. What do you make of that?
I mean, I think it's very clear that Iran has tens of thousands of centrifuges that need to be addressed in any deal. The idea that Netanyahu is lying to Congress and, telling an untrue story is completely inaccurate. And I also think, responding to some comments before, it's Congress that ultimately has the power over this agreement. It's Congress that has placed the sanctions on Iran with the international community. It's Congress that represents the American people. So Netanyahu is going to Congress to communicate with the American people and communicate with the leaders who make these decisions as the representative of the Israeli people. He's not speaking for all Jews. He's not speaking for all Israelis. He's speaking for the security of his country.
That's not entirely true. And I think an important thing to understand about sanctions legislation is that there's always built into them, since the beginning of the sanctions legislation, an ability for the president to lift them if he decides. It's like waivers and presidential discretions. Part of what AIPAC is trying to do now is Corker introduced a bill on Friday that would try to reduce the president's ability to lift sanctions without Congress's approval.
And what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that?
But I'm just saying, it's not exactly what you said, that they already have that power. No, they're trying to enlarge, they're trying to make their power over lifting sanctions greater now with new legislation.
Can I interject? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Haviv, what did you want to add?
Doesn't that suggest that there's a very good explanation, rather than a disingenuous talking point, for why Netanyahu would speak to Congress, address Congress, and why John Boehner would invite him to do so? If you want to stop this deal, if you want to delay this deal, the only avenue is Congress. And it's fascinating that President Obama has been fighting tooth and nail and promising to veto any legislation that would give Congress more say on
the problem is, if you're actually serious about a diplomatic deal, AIPAC and Netanyahu's threshold is zero enrichment, zero capabilities.
That's not true. That is not true.
Yes, it is.
I'm sorry, that's the United Nations Security Council.
They want to completely dismantle all of Iran's nuclear...
Can I just interject here for 1.1?
Mayor, go ahead, and then we're going to push on, because it is true and it isn't true. As exciting as it is, I'm going to move that along. Mayor, what did you want to say?
Number one, sanctions, if there is a deal, would not be removed in their entirety. Some of the sanctions, they will be suspended, some of them will be kept. If Iran doesn't live up to its commitments, they will be reimposed. If Iran doesn't answer questions regarding its past military dimension, it will be imposed, number one. Number two, it's a pipe dream that some people are trying to sell, that Iran will give everything up. You know what? If you want Ayatollah Khamenei to give everything up right now, then why don't you buy him a villa in New York? Because the day after he does that, he will need to move there. He's not going to do that. What we're trying to do is to have a deal that's sustainable, that will make sure that the Iranians are left with something, we are left with something, which will be 1 year breakout plus intrusive inspections.
All right, guests, take a pause for a moment. All right, guests, take a pause for a moment, because I just want to push things along a little bit, because time is not our friend today. All right, so Susan Rice, who's the National Security Advisor, said on a program in the US, the Charlie Rose interview show, this on February the 24th. I think this is an important element to bring into the discussion. Have a listen to this.
What has happened over the last several weeks, by virtue of the invitation that was issued by the Speaker and the acceptance of it by Prime Minister Netanyahu on 2 weeks in advance of his election, is that on both sides there has now been injected a degree of partisanship, which is not only unfortunate, I think it's destructive of the fabric of the relationship, and it's something that...
Destructive of the fabric of the relationship, that from the National Security Advisor to President Obama. Haviv, what do you make of that? Do you feel like this week of President Netanyahu being out in the US is actually not going to be helpful to what's going on behind the scenes?
So I make of it two things. First of all, if that relationship suffers, then that is a strategic problem for Israel. The United States is incredibly important for Israel. Israel does not depend on the United States to survive, but it certainly would not be a very pleasant neighbor without the United States. But it's fascinating that the White House would threaten, would raise the bar that much, and that Netanyahu, that would not dissuade him. There's almost a desire to clash between the White House and Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Who wants to fight? Who wants to fight more? Where is that desire? Is it from Israel, or is it from the U.S.?
You know, the White House has heard exactly as many complaints from the Saudis and the Jordanians and the Emiratis and other regional powers as it has from the Israelis, but they don't have the ability to go to Congress. So I think we're seeing an element. I'm not saying it's the right thing to do. I'm just saying in Netanyahu's mind, I think he feels that the very fact that he is facing down the Americans, the very fact that this is so brazen, is positioning Israel as a force to reckon with in the region that maybe those Arab allies can rely on in ways that they used to believe they could rely on the United States. But if Iran reaches breakout ability, then that would be undermined. In other words, it's almost as though in challenging the United States, Netanyahu is actually trying to gather around him and create a new power center to oppose Iran for sort of a post-American region.
Malika?
There's kind of a split opinion online here on what this will do to the U.S. and Israel relationship. So Kareem says the relationship will remain the same whether representatives skip the speech or not. At the end of the day, they're hardcore supporters of Israel. And Rachel, there's also this tweet on the other side, though, from JDC, and he says, this is short-sighted, it's a stunt, and it could harm Israeli interests in decades to come. Do you think there's truth to that?
Well, I think what this speech does, there's the American-Israel relationship, and that exists. But despite what people often try to say, which I think doesn't really make sense, is that it is a political relationship. They're two countries with two interests. They say they have shared values, but those are also political values. So of course it's a political relationship. And I think that the U.S.-Israel relationship's future hinges on whether they're going to be able to, there's some key differences in foreign policy objectives between the U.S. and Israel. So one is the two-state solution. Another is this deal over whether both Israel and the United States agree that Iran should not develop a nuclear weapon, but whether or not they're going to be able to...
So Rachel, where do you think we are with U.S.-Israel relations from your perspective?
I mean, they're strong, they exist.
Strong, right?
But they're changing because I think American Jews are learning that they don't have to agree with everything Netanyahu says. Like, you saw 20,000 Jews in one afternoon sign a petition saying that Bibi doesn't speak for him in one day. That is unprecedented in American-Israel relationships.
Let me just check in with Jonathan. Jonathan, what's your take on that? U.S.-Israel relations, how shaken are they, if at all?
Sure. I would respond to Rachel by saying that Bibi and Obama do not represent the strength of the U.S., the nature of the U.S.-Israel relationship. They're just the political leaders right now at this moment.
But they can impact it.
Sure, of course. So let me just finish my thought, is that in a couple of years, we're going to potentially see new leaders in Israel and in the United States. And the relationship is still going to be strong. The relationship is still going to be enduring. And these points about whether or not both believe in fully believe in two states, or both believe in the nature, both believe that Iran should not acquire a nuclear weapon, both believe that Israel is a strategic asset to the United States, both believe that Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. Those facts are not going away, and whoever is in power, whether it be Democrat or Republican, the relationship is going to exist, and it's going to be very, very strong. So this speech, in my mind, doesn't really it's about Iran. It's not necessarily about the relationship, because the relationship is too big to fail.
See, I want a strong U.S. relationship, but I do not think that it's just going to exist no matter what happens between anyone. And that's why I think so many top American Jewish leaders and former U.S. ambassadors to Israel have warned so strongly about this. And that's why everyone is so worried, because I think, yes, it's strong, but it's not forever if you just do whatever you want. It has to... actions impact it. It can change, and so we need to be careful.
I agree with that.
All right, Rachel and Jonathan, take a pause. Mayor, what's your take on this in our final 30 seconds?
If the Iranian officials are watching this program, they must be very grateful to Prime Minister Netanyahu, because look, we're talking about Israel-US crisis or problems because of this speech about the Congress, and that's the major point of this evening, and not about the Iranian nuclear program. Inadvertently, Prime Minister Netanyahu, with his divisive action regarding the Congress, has given the Iranians a victory.
All right. So thank you very much to Rachel, Jonathan, Haviv and Mia. We are taking you to the post show. The post show is stream.aljazeera.com. Let me also remind you, Malika did tell you at the beginning about our app. Our app is running right now. Have a look here on my laptop. Are Netanyahu's concerns about a nuclear deal with Iran valid? That's one of the questions that's running in our Stream app. And you can join in and continue to stream the stream on our app in just a moment. So we will see you online. Thanks so much for watching. Take care. Hello there, this is the Stream's online post show. We've been talking about Israel's relationship with the United States and whether or not it's been damaged by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Aviv, I'm really curious as to what's happening back in Israel. Are we seeing this as an election, part of an election campaign? Or are we seeing this as, oh my goodness, what is happening out there in the US and what is our Prime Minister doing? Or is a more nuanced, complex conversation going on?
Well, so, you know, a lot of things can be true all at once. I don't think that there's any doubt that Netanyahu believes this passionately is the sort of essential challenge that he sees as his historic challenge, the Iran issue. At the same time, it doesn't hurt that 2 weeks before the election, he's addressing both houses of Congress. I could tell you that under Israeli law, Israel's Central Election Commission, there are very serious restrictions on campaign advertising in the few days before an election.
Right.
So his live speech is actually going to be delayed 5 minutes so that the Supreme Court justice running the election can actually cut out any parts in which he uses what he deems to be campaign rhetoric.
Wow.
So
okay.
It's certainly being treated as a campaign speech by Israeli law enforcement, put it that way.
Sure. Sure. Jonathan, you seem to be very supportive of what Benjamin Netanyahu is doing. Do you see it also as a piece of electioneering? Does that bother you at all?
I think it bothers me a little bit in the sense that I want to see a fair election in Israel that's not influenced by outside politics. But I would just to point out to Rachel's comments that Bibi is the president right now. He is the prime minister, and it is his duty at the moment to represent the Israeli people. And I think he's doing that right now by making his speech to Congress.
Rachel? Your response to Jonathan would be what?
Response to Jonathan?
Yeah.
I think he's representing Israel. I don't think he's the speaker of the Jewish people, which he's made that comment strangely a couple times in the recent weeks. But yeah, he is coming as a representative of his country to address as any foreign leader would. He's not the speaker of all the Jews.
You know, the people from the Democratic Party lawmakers who will not be attending the speech, the parts of the Black Caucus, if not all of the Black Caucus, will not be attending the speech. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think there are 40 members of Congress on record now who are not going to be going. I think that it's a big deal. I think it's also a big deal that Netanyahu turned down a meeting with Senate Democrats when they extended him that invitation. Right. Which also doesn't make sense. If he just wanted to tell them about what's going on, it doesn't really make sense why he would not take that opportunity while he was in DC.
Sure.
So it is all sort of troubling. It's all like building, the whole past month has been really insane.
Right. Okay.
What
Go ahead.
really worries me about these 40 members of Congress not coming to the speech, this is really what worries me. And you know, to think that perhaps if Netanyahu is re-elected, the relations between Obama and Netanyahu the last 2 years of President Obama's presidency are not going to get better. They could get even worse. And if Hillary Clinton is elected, let's not forget Bill Clinton did not have good relations with Netanyahu. That means if there's going to be another Democratic president in the United States, the relationship between the government of Israel and the government of the United States, which is chosen by the people, is going to deteriorate. And this is something for us to worry about. Anyone who cares about US-Israel relationship and anyone who cares for Israeli national interests like I do has to be worried about it. And the Prime Minister has to tone it down. He wants to address Iran, fine, but don't take on the government of the United States. You don't hurt your enemy by slapping your best friend in the face.
Haviv, can you clarify exactly what you mean when you say the current United States government is less favorable to Israel? I understand what you mean in terms of partisan politics, but at the same time, I don't see your point in terms of the relationship being damaged at the moment.
And you meant that for Haviv?
Yes.
Yeah, Haviv, go ahead.
Well, I would just want to respond to everyone here just by saying, unless Netanyahu is right. If Netanyahu is right on the substance of the debate, then from his perspective, all of this resistance to his speech in Congress has much more to do with the White House campaigning to marginalize him than it has to do with the substance of the debate. He turned down those Democratic senators with a letter that apologized and just said, if I speak to you, then I'm accepting the narrative that says that my speech to Congress is a speech to Republicans. So I'm not going to do a Congress speech and then a Democrat speech. And those senators actually got together, a group of bipartisan senators, and they're having lunch with Netanyahu immediately after the speech. I don't think Netanyahu wanted this to go down the way it went down. I don't think he's enjoying all the heat. But I do think that everything that we're talking about here just pales into insignificance if he's right on the substance.
Sure. Let me just talk about the substance here with the focus that Netanyahu has on Iran. Let me show you something here. Very famous sequence and scenario. This was back in 2012 when Prime Minister Netanyahu addressed the United Nations with basically graphics, okay? Graphics, very, very memorable graphics. Have a look at this.
By next spring, at most by next summer, at current enrichment rates, they will have finished the medium enrichment and move on to the final stage.
All right. So that was very memorable, but that was back in 2012, so a couple of years ago. Haviv, has any of that concern really really actually happened? Because that's the worry that we hear Prime Minister Netanyahu say this often and regularly, but what's happened?
It's really important to understand, the Iranian nuclear program is not a static program. And there is tremendous resistance to it, including especially by the United States, by Israeli intelligence. Iranian nuclear scientists are assassinated, there are strange explosions, viruses. That program is constantly being set back. At the same time, they discover entire facilities. For example, the one at Qom was discovered that they simply hadn't known about. So we know that this program is both advancing, possibly faster than we know, and there's a constant effort to delay and push it back. Inside Israel, there are people who actually disagree with Netanyahu that the Iranians are so close to a bomb, not because they disagree the Iranians are trying to get a bomb, but because they say, for example, former Mossad chief Meir Dagan, who says the intelligence war against this program is going to succeed indefinitely. We can continue to push this program back.
Right.
We don't have to do a bombing. We don't have to have a crisis with Vietnam.
Sure, and just
something very important to note about that diagram is that Iran listened to that diagram, and thanks to the deal that President Obama reached with Iran, Iran did not cross that threshold, and in fact Iran is reducing its stockpile of 20% enriched uranium. I'm not saying that Iran didn't lie before about its nuclear program. Habib is absolutely right. They hit the enrichment site at Fordow, they hit the enrichment site at Natanz, both were exposed. But what's important to note is that the joint plan of action which Iran agreed to, Iran has respected every letter of that agreement. And what we're trying to see if we can build on that to reach a deal. Ayatollah Khamenei has not said yes to a deal. And also, let's not forget, a lot of negotiations are done in secret, but they're not brought into the public. But we in Israel, I think it's safe to think that we know what's going on, and if there's a deal that the Congress afterward doesn't like, they can voice their opinion and they can torpedo it as they've done before.
All right, gentlemen, I'm convinced that this debate is not over yet. In fact, there'll be even more debate once people have actually heard this infamous speech, or this famous speech, depending on how the speech goes. But for now, thank you to Rachel Cohen, Jonathan Camel, Meir Javed Anfar, Haviv Rettig Gur, as well. It's been great having you here in this conversation and on our online conversation. What's been going on, Malika?
I will give you one last thought from Holly, who gives us what she thinks will happen after this speech. She says Bibi's speech to Congress will pass, and it'll be as groundbreaking as the one at the UN General Assembly that you showed, Femi. Just expect good memes out of it, just like that diagram that so many of us are talking about. Like how it looked at this.
All right, thanks everybody. It's been a pleasure having you on the stream today, and we will see you online.